Hi, my name is Matthew and welcome to part 2 of the SQL injections video. If you haven't watched part 1, I recommend that you do, and I'll provide a link in the description below. In this video, what I want to do is explain a bit more of how I implemented my course line application. I will go through some of my code and explain my design, and I will show you why SQL injections affected my code in the first place. I'll also show you how to fix it in order to prevent SQL injections from happening. So this was how I implemented my design. On my left-hand side, you can see that this is the front-end application. We had form inputs, which were provided into my main program, and my main program formulated a query, which was then passed into the Postgres server. The Postgres server then made a query and affected the database. It then returned the result tuples, and then my program then rendered it in order to provide an HTML document to the user. Now, on the left-hand side here, we have the web browser. In the middle section here, I used Python, as well as 2 additional libraries. I used Flask in order to connect to the front end and render my HTML documents, as well as route them, and I used PsychoPG2 in order to connect to my Postgres server. Now let's take a look at some of the code. So if we go back to our presentation, you see that this part is my web browser. So my web browser was Chrome, and the way I presented my HTML documents was through the use of HTML templates, as well as CSS files for styling. So this here was how my HTML documents were prepared. If we go back to the presentation, we also have the middle layer, which was my Python code, connected to Flask and PsychoPG2. So if I look into my repo, this here was my main application. This here was my Flask, which was for routing in order for the front end, and this was also how I rendered my templates, my HTML documents. This over here was my backend, which was connected to PsychoPG2, and I'll go through a bit more of this in detail later. Now, if we go back to my presentation, we also have the database. So my database is currently running in Postgres. So here I have a UNSW database. If I go into my UNSW database, I'm able to see what tables exist, as well as some of the table contents. And I'm able to see the results of this. So what part of my program does is it uses PsychoPG2 to connect to the Postgres server. And using this, it is able to perform SQL statements. So let's now try to trace the flow of my program. First things first, I'm going to run my Python application. Here's my URL, and I'm going to copy this. If I want to search for something, I'll type in 1521. So what this does is it provides a form input 1521 into my application. If you look into my PowerPoint, you'll see that 1521 was provided to my application. What happens next? So if you look into my code, and I go into run, you can see that my main program is in routes. When I go into routes, when I hit submit, I produce a post request, and this post request is used to formulate my query. So as you can see, my query string is extracted from my post request, and I try to run my query. So what I'm doing is I have my query here, and what this does is it puts the course inside this string. So my string is 1521, so what I did was put 1521 in here. After it formulates my query, what it does is execute my query and return the results as a list. 1521 was made to use and formulate my query. My program then used PsychoPG in order to run my SQL statements, and this returns some tuples. My program then returns this as a list to my routing application. And then my routing application then renders an HTML document. So it returns it as a list. If I go into my route application, it renders my template. So that's the basic flow of how it works. Now let's try to see why an SQL injection occurs. So to run an SQL injection, recall that I have to use a quotation mark. So if I hit this, it should destroy my SQL query, and I should get a server error. Now what I've done in my application was I actually printed out what the SQL query was. If you look here, we can see that the string is not properly terminated, and that's why you got the server error that we saw over here. So to fix this is quite a simple fix. So we can't just paste the string into here, because this may result in the string no longer being valid. So what I'm going to do is make a very small change. I'm going to use the PsychoPG library in order to sanitize this input. So this is what I'm going to do. I'll remove the format. I'll replace this entire thing with %s, and then I'll formulate and insert my query here. So we have the percentage marks, we have the course, and then we have another percentage mark here. And this here will basically ensure that if we have a quotation mark, it is properly escaped. So if I go back into my application and attempt to run this, we see that we did not get the same server error. So let's take a look at what the actual SQL query was. As you can see here, there's a double quotation mark, and in Python, what that does is it concatenates it together. Now we have a proper string, and this prevents SQL injections from happening again. So if I try to do what I had before, union select 1, 2, 3, this here no longer works. So as you can see, that was a pretty simple fix. There was not much changed into it. What I did was basically use this library in order to sanitize it. And that would be how you prevent SQL injection from happening. I provided a link to my GitHub if you're interested in the source code.